The year is 2010. The first iPad had been released by Apple, LeBron James made one of the biggest decisions in sports history, and Justin Bieber dropped one of the most notorious songs in music history. What a time that was. The 2010s brought a new wave of dances, video games, and overall shift in media. But one channel that saw the landscape of culture changing the most was Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network was coming off of some of its greatest eras, but also some of its worst. But the next challenge that would come its way was having to adapt to a whole new generation. A generation that maybe missed out on the glory days of the network. So how would Cartoon Network respond to this new generation? Well, it will respond with one of the greatest eras of the 2010s. The Check It era. The Check It era is one of those eras where if you watched it back then, you just said to yourself, wow, where did my childhood go? I say that because what we got from the Check It era was some of the best in quality that Cartoon Network had to offer. But what did the Check It era bring to the table? What were the bumper styles like? And why do so many people regard these three shows as some of the best in cartoon history? Well, we're about to find all of that out right now. The Check It Era 1.0 was launched on May 29, 2010, and is the network's 10th official era. The president of Cartoon Network at the time was Stuart Snyder, and the studio behind 1.0 was Brand New School. Now, usually with these era deep dives, I like to point out the biggest thing about the era, which usually ends up being the overall brand look. But one thing that I think deserves some attention, although simple, is the name of the era. Throughout the many eras of Cartoon Network, the one thing that the names of the eras did was communicate to you what you were going to get out of them. The checkerboard era told you that you were getting bumpers featured in a literal checkerboard style. The Powerhouse era implied that you were getting a classic slapstick in your face wham bam thank you ma'am style. And CN City implied that you were getting an interconnected hub of cartoon characters that would interact with each other in a city. And with the Yes era, no, we don't talk about the Yes era. So with that being said, what am I supposed to expect when I hear the word check it? But Murray, it's right in front of your face. Check it equals checkerboard. Duh. Well, yeah, of course, that's obvious, but when I hear the word check it, I don't think of it as a certain look or type of aesthetic. I think of it more so as a statement being made. Hey yo, check it. That's old school slang for you need to put your attention on this right now. But yes, with the look of the Check It era, it's quite obvious that they wanted to pay homage to the first era that started Cartoon Network, while also incorporating some new styles of its own to show an evolution of sorts. Some of the network's standard bumpers featured a card that acted as a flip book to show different cubes moving frame by frame that ultimately revealed the CN logo. Now, speaking of logos, one key change going into this era would be the new CN logo. Prior to the Check It era, the Nudes era had Cartoon Network's old logo favor more of a 3D look, in which the C and N looked like they were stacked onto each other. This would make sense considering the nudes were created in a CGI format, so the logo had to fit along with that. The logo went from a 3D cube look to the letters having more of a 2D square look, favoring more of a, dare I say, minimalistic look. Now listen, I'd be the first to tell you, I can argue up a storm on how minimalism has destroyed logos that have had effort and passion put into them, but I'd be here all day. But here, being that it's Cartoon Network, at the end of the day, their branding is a checkerboard, and you can only do but so much with a checkerboard before it feels like you're doing too much. With that said, some of the standard bumpers included these different color tiles that would come together to form a dimensional room of sorts, with the CN logo to top it off. Another one included a grid-like platform that spun like, the best way I could describe it to you is this way. You remember that one level from Super Mario Sunshine where Mario had to spray all those tiles to match them like the star, and you had that one freaking tile that just wanted to be just difficult. It's a little detail, but when I saw how the tiles were spinning, I just immediately got PTSD. I don't know why that's the first thing I thought about, but that's the connection I made. Another bumper had the camera moving through these doors that would open to reveal the logo. Almost felt like you were breaking into Dexter's lab with how aggressive they were opening. Other bumpers such as this one had a cuckoo clock style that popped out that would reveal a house, which popped out of another house, which popped out the CN logo. There were other bumpers that had a pencil traversing through a maze that would find its way to the CN logo. Bumpers like these had a slot machine feel to them, with one of the three parts either featuring some random object or a cartoon character that was featured during this era. Of course, with the seasonal holidays that would come around, Cartoon Network would adjust accordingly by giving bumpers like the Flipbook and Maze ones a Halloween or Christmas feel to them. Some of the biggest characteristics of these bumpers were they had a sense of speed and snappiness to them. The quick movements really made them feel like there was no time wasted, which is funny because one of the workers at Brand New School felt the exact same way with what they had to say here. Because we created such a gridded and structured design for the overall approach, it became imperative that the movement of these pieces felt snappy, fast-paced, and above all, playful and full of life. Now, one thing that you might have noticed with these bumpers is a certain color scheme that they all seem to fit. Cartoon Network would incorporate the CMYK color scheme for their bumpers. CMYK meaning cyan, magenta, yellow, and key or black. Cyan, magenta, and yellow are all the colors you get when you mix primary colors together, so basically Cartoon Network used secondary colors as their branding for this era, which was a nice choice. Anything that was fleshy stays magenta, the water is cyan, yellow is used when needed, and black is used the most out of all the colors, of course. When you look at the color orange, you associate it with Nickelodeon, green with PBS Kids, and Disney has a wide range of purples and blues. I mean, when you think of Cartoon Network, you think black and white, but I'm sure the network was also thinking, yeah, that's not enough. We're gonna have to branch out and experiment with some different colors a bit. While the nudes era seemed to have used an entire color wheel, I like how they used only a couple colors to define their color scheme. But one thing that I noticed with a lot of these types of bumpers was their lack of voice announcing, which I'm sure was intentional, being that these might have just been placeholder bumpers, just to kind of show what to expect with the checkered era, show off some animation. There wasn't meant to be any voice announcing at all. But all because there wasn't voice announcing for the standard bumpers doesn't mean that there wouldn't be any voice announcing at all. Not only would there be voice announcing, but for the first time in years, Cartoon Network would feature physical mascots that would represent the checkered era. The mascots would feature the CN letters dressed up by two guys. Nicholas Kocher was the C and Brian McElhenney was the N. These two would go on to be the official voice announcers for most of the promotional branding, as well as the next and later bumpers for the era.
Does this look okay?
You look fine.
How about this side?
Looks good.
And right here?
Still good. You look fine, trust me.
I'm just nervous.
Opening weekend jitters, that's all. Check it.
Check it. Oh, see, I messed it up.
And for whatever it's worth, I enjoyed the two of these guys. Just seeing them do these little skits really gave the logos some personality, and I always was looking forward to what little skit they do next. Speaking of next, the next bumpers are where I feel Brand New School's animations shine the best. The next bumpers would start with an abbreviated CN logo and then suddenly expand into, oh, those little weasels they are. They cleverly brung back the original CN logo, but in a way that fits the new logo as well. The logo was redesigned as part of the network's rebranding. Initially, another firm was in charge of this, but their work needed to be more appropriate due to the complete overhaul of the brand. Some of us were type designers in our previous lives, so we couldn't resist volunteering what we thought the logo should be. Very nice way to introduce a classic. But crazy enough, that's not even the best part of the bumper. The best part was how the bumper featured these black tiles that were placed in the foreground and background of the screen. These tiles weren't just there for show, however. These tiles function like different portals in which specific cartoon characters could go through and wrap around them. Like, this is some underrated animation. I really do tip my hat off to BNS for even trying something like this. Like, this takes some skill. Seeing these next bumpers reminded me of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi intro, where Goku and Boo were fighting in this weird dimension, and you can see the different tiles in the background. I kid you not, that's exactly what I thought of when I saw these dimensional bumpers. But not every show had the opportunity to interact with the tiles, so as an alternative, they just placed clips from said show into the tiles. Makes sense, being it would have taken a lot of work to animate about 25 plus cartoon characters with their likeness and cadence to interact with these tiles. Trust me, I love a bumper that has effort and passion and creativity put into it, but the last thing we need is another CN City dilemma where things got expensive. For as much as I love 1.0's next bumpers, somehow BNS would outdo themselves again with the signature letter bumpers. The letter bumpers was a way of really showcasing just how skilled BNS was in 2D and 3D animation. The bumper would start with a person or place, and a certain sequence of events would happen, which would eventually morph into one of the letters from Cartoon Network. And yes, there was a dedicated bumper for all 14 letters, all with different types of animations and styles and situations. It was really cool. I highly recommend you check all of them out because you might not catch what is happening in these bumpers the first time. Now, you might be wondering why the letter bumpers were animated in a black and white color scheme. Well, it wasn't by accident because these bumpers would be a part of their primetime bumpers. This is such a neat detail because during the day, the bumpers were colorful and bright, while these ones were darker. You know, kind of like how a smartphone goes from daytime to night mode after a certain time. These two bumpers easily are some of my favorite bumpers from 1.0, but you know what made them even better? The shows that they were featured with. Time out for a sec. Isn't this the same era that had the jump scare bumpers? Now, I already know what you're thinking. Murray, what are you talking about? I could have sworn that during the Check It era, there would be this bumper that would come on out of nowhere and it would just be like, oh yeah, jump scare in 3, 2, 1, and then it would show like some random object or picture thinking it would scare you. And literally as a kid, I did not know how to react. I had no time to run out the room. But I could have sworn this bumper aired during the Check It era, and I actually tried looking on YouTube for it, but I don't even think they know what I'm talking about. It could be lost media up until this point. If you guys know what I'm talking about and you're actually able to find this certain bumper, please let me know in the comments. It's crazy that I even have to mention animated shows as a strength for Cartoon Network, considering at one point it felt like Cartoon Network's focus was redirected elsewhere for some time. But this time around, it feels like they got their swagger back. A couple of shows that aired during this era would actually migrate over from the Nudes era, which included Chowder and The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. However, there would be a complete overload of new premiere shows that would air during this era. Ben 10, Ultimate Alien, Generator Rex, Symbiotic Titan, Robotonomy, The Problem Solvers, or should I say ADHD Simulator, Secret Mount 4 Awesome, which all I gotta say about that show is booty. Ben 10 Omniverse, Uncle Grandpa.
What the is this piece of
Good morning.
Mixels, Clarence, Over the Garden Wall, We Bear Bears, Steven Universe, and even a Powerpuff Girls reboot. Yeah, we don't talk about the Powerpuff Girls reboot. And the infamous Teen Titans Go. Teen Titans Go is a video for another day. But what I meant a moment ago with Cartoon Network redirecting their focus elsewhere was a big issue for the past years, dating back to the fall era, was Cartoon Network's prioritization of live action content. The Prefuse era as well as CN Real was where the live action shows felt the most overbearing and really rubbed the CN community in the wrongest of ways. Destroy, Build, Destroy, and Dude What Would Happen would be two shows that would migrate over from the Nudes era and CN Real block. However, new live action shows would include Level Up, and I must say, one of the live action shows on here was a low-key banger. And that show would be Hold.
Don't miss Hole in the Wall. New series premiere tonight at 7:30, 6:30 Central. Only on Cartoon Network.
I will watch Hole in the Wall and think to myself, this had to be one of the funnest game shows to be a part of, especially as a kid. It just looked like pure chaos. Seeing the contestants have to think in real time how they contort themselves to match whatever shape in the wall it was, and the shapes got more complex, was just so entertaining to watch. Now, of course, looking back on it, Hole in the Wall definitely fits the Nickelodeon game show contestant vibes, but being that it was on Cartoon Network, I didn't mind it because of how entertaining it was. In all honesty, I would take any one of these live action shows compared to the filth that we would get with this monstrosity of a creation. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the annoying orange. If there ever was a Why Does This Exist award, I am 100% of the belief that the annoying orange would be a first ballot nominee and probably the only nominee for that award. Like, I feel ashamed to even say that I remember I watched this show as a kid. Like, the annoying orange looks like one of those things like Nutter Butter's TikTok will promote, or, you know, like I've been seeing this thing on TikTok, like when you're overstimulated in a public environment, like the walls start having eyeballs and fruits start having mouths. That looks like what the annoying orange looks like. It looks like a symptom of overstimulation. But you know, all the jokes I have for the annoying orange is in good faith. You know, it's all for a good laugh. But you know, I feel like after the Check It era, you know, the annoying orange kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. You know, was the backlash too much for the show? Like, left me a little worried, you know. So if any of you know, the annoying orange's whereabouts, please let me know. For as bad of a live action show we get with the annoying orange, it pales in comparison with one of the best live action shows that we would get to ever air on Cartoon Network.
My crew, my crew, my crew, my crew, my crew, my crew, my crew is incredible. My crew, my crew, my crew, my crew, my crew, my crew, my crew is incredible.
I cannot begin to tell you just how impactful this show was for me, being 12, 13 at the time. Like, I don't even know if I can go into detail, being that I kind of already made a YouTube video about Incredible Crew that I don't talk about. What on earth happened to Incredible Crew? This video is brought to you by Manta Sleep. Now, one thing about me, guys, is that I love naps, but being that my naps are during the day, I'm constantly having to deal with distractions. Distractions like bright sunlight hitting my room, the shameful sight of a popcorn ceiling, and that freaking smoke alarm outside of my room. Basically, napping feels like a chore. But ever since I started using Manta Sleep, that all changed. Manta Sleep specializes in sleep masks that are super comfortable, adjustable, and lightweight. With its premium design and feel, the sleep mask provides true blackout vision and zero eye pressure, completely doing away with those visual distractions. And to handle my smoke alarm issues, I use the Manta Sleep white noise machine to help drown out any outside noises. With the press of a button, the white noise machine provides rich and soothing sounds like white, rain, ocean, and fan noises. When you combine the Manta Sleep Mask with the white noise machine, it will make your sleep feel like an absolute privilege. Disclaimer, Manta Sleep will not make your soul leave your body. Please make sure you check out the Manta Sleep link down in the description, and make sure you use code Murrayvation to get 10% off your purchase. A huge thank you to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. But I will say this, I remember coming home from school and I remember turning it on and watching it, and I just remember the cast was a solid lineup of voice actors. You had talented young actors like Jeremy Shada, Shamik Moore, and so on. But one of the best parts about the show, besides the skits, were the songs that each actor would perform. Songs like Bad Luck, So What. I remember listening to errands with my mom at home, and I'd go to school the next day. In the lunchroom, I'd hear other kids rapping the song verse by verse. This was the show I needed to experience in order for me to realize that I was no longer a kid. I'm a teenager. I'm growing up. Out of all the eras that feature live action content, the Check It era by far is the best lineup of content that I've seen thus far, because here, the best way I could tell you, it felt the most digestible. If you take out the annoying orange, this is a dang near perfect lineup of live action shows for a network that prides themselves in animated content. But of course, as you've hopefully seen in the thumbnail, the Check It era would not be where it is today if it wasn't for the 3 shows that got it there. Adventure Time, The Amazing World of Gumball, and Regular Show. These were the 3 premiere shows that would be featured during the Check It era. But these weren't just any 3 shows. These were 3 shows that bursted onto the scene and would become smash hits on the channel. What made these 3 shows in particular stand out from the rest of the lineup was their level of quality that was unmatched. While all 3 shows had a unique sense of animation, comedy, and likable characters, they also brought their own strengths to the table that made them individually visually great as well. Adventure Time was magical with its mixture of medieval creatures, set pieces, and themes. Goofy with its type of language and comedy used, and compelling with its story of a human boy named Finn and his magical dog Jake as they explored the land of Ooo. The amazing world of Gumball was experimental with its series of different animations used for different characters. Relatable with its depiction of a 12-year-old kid living in a family with a mom, dad, sister, and brother. And dare I say, as the cool kids like to use, meta, with its awareness to pop culture, jokes, and references. And Regular Show had the right mix of chaotic energy that made the term regular simply a gag. The show felt like a mix between Beavis and Butthead and Rick and Morty, but in a way that fit Cartoon Network's style and taste. These three shows would become cult classics as they'd go on to culminate multiple seasons, merchandise, and dedicated fandoms. If you're still not sold on the long-term impact that these three shows would have, let me put into perspective the longevity of these three shows around the time that I was watching them. Around the time that these three shows were even being teased, I was around the tail end of my 5th grade year. Afterwards, I went through middle school, high school, and college. Now, I'm 26, and these shows are still very much being aired on Cartoon Network, either with spin-offs, new episodes, new seasons. You gotta think that's 15 plus years of relevancy. With the widespread impact that these three shows would have, they're one of the biggest reasons why a lot of fans of Cartoon Network refer to the Check-It era as Cartoon Network's Renaissance period. But I find it funny how the idea of a big three has been so prominent throughout history. For Cartoon Network, it's no exception. But you want to know one of the craziest facts about one of these three shows? There was actually a pretty good chance that a show like Adventure Time could have not been on Cartoon Network at all. Had things have been different, Adventure Time could have actually been with the competition. Before Adventure Time would find its way on Cartoon Network in 2010, in 2008, Adventure Time was searching for a channel to call home. Pendleton Ward, the mastermind of Adventure Time, originally pitched his idea to Nickelodeon, hoping to get greenlit. And here you can actually see early pilots of the show, as some of the characters and likeness of the show would translate over to what we would see on Cartoon Network. Now, you would think with the fever dream of a show that Adventure Time offered would be exactly what Nickelodeon was looking for, right? Right?
Wrong!
To Ward's surprise, Adventure Time got rejected not once, but twice. Reportedly, network executives at Nickelodeon deemed Adventure Time too weird and unconventional. Apparently, at the time, they wanted a show that fit more of a traditional story with a traditional design. Now, I do agree that Adventure Time has a huge element of absurdity to it. I can't even tell you what schmauzau means. But nonetheless, when you look at other shows like Invader Zim, Monsters, heck, even Kappa Mikey, I scratch my head a bit because Adventure Time would have fit like a glove alongside those same shows on Nicktoons. But of course, as we know now, years later, Pendleton Ward would pitch his idea to Cartoon Network, and unlike Nickelodeon, would see the full picture that Ward was trying to paint, and granted him 10 seasons to do so. Looking back though, this move made all the more sense considering that Pendleton Ward already had history with Cartoon Network, being that he worked as a storyboard artist for Flapjack. Although history will play out how it would, if you'd be so willing to indulge me for a sec, I want to play a game of what if. What if things were different? What if a show like Adventure Time was exactly what Nickelodeon was looking for? What if they said yes? Well, we would have gotten a ripple effect of events that would have completely changed the trajectory of both Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. Now, I want you to do me a favor because this requires full participation. I want you to just simply close your eyes for a sec and picture this. It's 2008 and Nickelodeon is being led by shows like SpongeBob, The Last Airbender, and Adventure Time. You want to talk about world domination? That's what I call a big three. Nickelodeon realistically could have had a trifecta of banger, widely popular, ultra fandom cartoon shows, whatever you want to call it, had they have said yes. But unfortunately, at the time, they were more concerned with feet. And as for Cartoon Network, they would have been without one of the biggest shows that the network has ever seen, leaving the third spot of the big three vacant.
The big three. It's just big me.
But as much as I love to continue to speculate, I actually want to pass it over to you. Would you have wanted to see Adventure Time on Nickelodeon? And if so, what show would have replaced the third spot of the big three on Cartoon Network? Definitely let me know in the comments. Hey guys, real quick, I just want to say a huge shout out to my Murray members. Thank you so much for your support. And also, for whatever it's worth, Azula also would like to give you hugs and kisses for your support as well. Azula, go kiss the Murray members. Now, only after a year of airing, the checkered era would evolve from 1.0 to 2.0. The difference being that not only there'd be additional bumpers that would be featured with the existing ones, but just as important, a new studio would be in charge of making the 2.0 bumpers, which would be Awesome Incorporated. The most prominent bumper would feature the CN logo that would rotate, then open itself up with two empty squares. These squares would feature a combination of live shows, animated shows, or the CN mascots. What's pretty clever about these bumpers was how they were edited. Something could be falling or running from one square and then make it look like it was moving to the next seemingly. The CN mascots would comment on the correlating show, and the bumper would end with what would be this version's catchphrase.
Oh, now that is how you get knocked into the pool.
Bravo.
Well played. Yeah.
If that sounds familiar to you, this would be the iconic catchphrase of Mordecai and Rigby. So much so that apparently this version is known as the Yeah era. A nice little fact about 2.0 is that the design of the bumpers are very much similar to Latin America's and Europe's block era bumpers, which you can very much see the similarities. Outside of that, 2.0 didn't bring anything crazy outside of these bumpers and a catchphrase. Hold on just a sec, guys. Hey guys. Future Murray here. What I had just said was a complete lie just now. As I was doing more research for this era, obviously with 2.0, I actually discovered that they made a couple cool changes to the bumpers and promos that were actually pretty significant. 2.0 featured these bumpers in which different cartoon characters would morph into other characters in these really cool 2D transformations. These bumpers are better known as morphing bumpers. And I must say, if Brand New School specializes in 3D animation, Awesome Incorporated seems to specialize in classic 2D animation. There's about 4 of these types of bumpers and they're all impressive. Another big change that 2.0 seemed to implement was the look of the mascots. At first there were faces to the name, but by the time 2.0 came, both actors' faces were covered, which would then only feature the C and N letters with just their limbs and voices. I can only chalk this up to the network wanted the mascots to feel more immersive with the brand. Around this time though, Cartoon Network put some real budget into the C and N mascots as their bumpers became more elaborate with better camera quality and stunts. This type of bumper was known as the Bring It promo. The Bring It promo seemed like Cartoon Network's first attempt to reach out to audiences via smartphone and computer, which is par for the course if the checkered era is the network's attempt to adapt to the 2010s. But honestly, other than that, 2.0, there isn't much else as to what it had to offer, although like I just said, those changes, although few, were very significant. But just out of curiosity, I decided to explore Awesome Incorporated's website, and upon arrival, I was greeted with this really cool trailer. I must say, Awesome Incorporated built a nice resume for themselves as they've worked on bumpers for FX, The Simpsons, and so on. But outside of their work with Cartoon Network, I actually discovered another well-respected block that they worked with. Yup. Awesome Incorporated back then and still to this day works on the bumpers for Adult Swim with shows like Squidbillies, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and Rick and Morty. And it seems as I do more research about the studios that Cartoon Network had worked with, I really start to see the level of talent that Cartoon Network had at the time. But from what I now know from 2.0, I can definitely say that it's one of the more underrated versions of the checkered era for sure. However, 3.0 would let the floodgates open. 3.0 of the Checkered era is where we see Cartoon Network really let their animation juices flow with the style of bumpers here. Impactus would create the bumpers, and here we'd see a lot of 2D animation being used. One of the bumpers had this cool sequence of different characters moving and morphing from one to the next. There's different patterns being used, shapes, characters are morphing and emerging out of each other. I mean, Impactus must have been on a badass trip making these bumpers. For as ambitious as these types of bumpers were, I feel like they went a little too hard with these. Like, I'm not even gonna attempt to explain how these bumpers in particular play it out word for word, because, I mean, how can you? Especially sticking with the CMYK color scheme, you know, these types of bumpers were definitely a bit too overstimulating with the colors and the movement. It was definitely a lot. Felt like I was looking at a kaleidoscope at times. Alongside these new trippy bumpers came 3.0's Next bumpers. The Next bumpers featured a rotating 3D cube that showed the featured show in the CMYK color scheme. It seems here that both 2D and 3D animation were incorporated here. But of course, being that I already checked out Brand New Schools and Awesome Incorporated's websites, I had to do the same for Impactus. Similarly, they've made work for FX shows, The Simpsons, and of course, Cartoon Network. With Cartoon Network, I was able to see some bumpers that I'm not sure have ever aired on the channel. They have a Halloween themed bumper and a Christmas one. And I just find it funny because these types of bumpers aren't as harsh on the eye as the trippy ones were. I think what makes the letter bumpers far more superior though are not only does the black and white color scheme make them more pleasant to the eye, but they just flowed smoother. Here I can definitely say, although more ambitious, 3.0 from a production standpoint is the weakest of all the versions. It's like, in this case, more ambitious doesn't always mean better. I think I'm always going to side more with simplicity and practicality. Now, around the time of 2014, Cartoon Network, specifically the Checkered era, would experience a change as far as the administration level. From 2010 to 2014, Stuart Snyder was the president of Cartoon Network, who would then be replaced by Christina Miller during this time. Now, I have gone on record and I've been very critical of Stuart Snyder. For the past 2 era retrospective videos that I made, I've said things along the line of, I don't believe he was the most qualified for the job. I do feel like he had a direct role in the negative impact of quality animation for Cartoon Network and the push for live action. I do feel like he had a hand in that, and I do feel like he improved some of that a little better in the nudes era. But around this time, I think Christina Miller, you know, there wasn't much that she needed to change. Everything was working well, the animations was good, you had the big three. The transition felt seamless. She didn't have to do too much, and that's what I feel here. So from an executive standpoint, I just want to point that out. Stuart Snyder had a big hand in the last 2 eras of Cartoon Network. But with the presidential change that Cartoon Network would have in 2014, June of 2014 would be where the Checkered era would evolve once again into the 3.5 version, known as CN Saiyan. Creative Group would be the studio in charge of this version's animations. But here's the thing about 2014. The iPhone 6 was the hottest smartphone in the market, and social media apps like Snapchat and Vine were growing in popularity around that time as well. Technology and social media was only growing bigger by the year, and Cartoon Network needed to respond. They already responded with a website that was running strong for years. They also created a mobile app where kids could experience Cartoon Network games, clips, and other features via iPhone. So what else could Cartoon Network create? Well, Cartoon Network would create an app where kids could record themselves saying goofy things and reciting characters' lines, and their clips would be used in the era's bumpers. This would be known as the CN Saiyan app. Here you can get an idea of how kids were used in the clips, and their clips were spliced into the bumpers. Some of the bumpers were edited in a way that fit a modern music video, with shows like Clarence, Regular Show, and Teen Titans Go being featured as well. The bumper would end with the voice saying,
Cartoon Network, are you seeing what we're saying?
Which of course was a play on word for Cartoon Network's letters. These types of bumpers weren't the most impressive from an animation standpoint, but from a social media engagement one, they knocked it out the park. The social media idea makes sense considering the times, but of course you gotta consider the aspect of safety as far as kids go. After all, you had kids recording themselves with their clips potentially being broadcasted to an audience of millions. Well, Cartoon Network had it to where kids couldn't record themselves without parental consent. Apparently Apparently the app had weekly challenges and updates, so where if kids participated but weren't featured, could have a chance to try again for the next week. And as far as real kids being featured in bumpers instead of cartoon characters, I'm always gonna side with animation being the style of choice, but the idea of kids being featured in bumpers definitely reminded me of the fall bumpers, which, you know, isn't bad at all. Kids are the demographic, so it only makes sense to feature them in bumpers, so I really can't complain all too much. But with where the app stands today, it's been defunct since then and seemed to only have been used to push social media and viewer engagement for that time. Now, before we get to the final version of the Check It era, there's a huge aspect of the era to where if I didn't mention it, I'd be completely undermining the impact that it had on the Check It era, and that's the music. For as many retrospectives that I've done regarding the Cartoon Network eras, one thing that I've never really been impressed with was the music used for the bumpers. Now notice, I said bumpers. Trust me, I remember the music videos that had the shrunken Ed and Eddie running away from Sarah. I remember the rap style music videos that had Dexter's Laboratory and just so many other bangers along the way. Cartoon Network has had a fair share of dedicated music used in their commercials. Some of the stuff that's been aired has been legendary. But no, I'm talking about the traditional bumper music that you hear in between the eras. The Checkerboard and Powerhouse era had a mixture of jazz, swing, and classical music, but nothing about it stood out to me. It just fit with the times. CN City did have a nice groovy beat that played during its next bumpers, but was overshadowed by the huge variety of bumpers that they had. And the fall era used a live action band named The Highs for the majority of the era's branding. But with the Check It era, they went all in with the music, with a dedicated soundtrack and some notable composers. Bluetooth and Mad Decent would be the composers behind the 1 and 2.0 bumper soundtracks, while Impactus would compose 3 and 4.0. Now, as I was doing research, I had no idea how big it was for Cartoon Network to collab with a studio like Mad Decent. So I did some digging. For one, Mad Decent's website is ultra sick looking. Once I got past how cool their front page was, as I did more research, I discovered that Mad Decent is actually a record label that has some prominent artists under its belt. Artists like Major Lazer and Diplo. Now, if you've ever listened to Diplo or Major Lazer, then you can definitely pick up on the similarities that are used with the beats in the bumpers. Being that this era is essentially Cartoon Network transitioning into the modern era, it definitely feels that way with the futuristic beats and techno style of music. For example, I'm almost for certain if you slipped one of these songs at a party like in the 2010s, I don't think anybody would have noticed. The beat just gives you this like, I'm ready to dance, I'm ready to go, get up and move type of feel, which is good. And just to show you how well these style of songs fit with the 2010s, someone made a TikTok video of like Drake's 2010 songs, edited over the Check It era's dimensional next bumpers, and like, you gotta hear it. You let me know if it fits.
Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, regular show. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, a new Teen Titans Go. Later, a new The Looney Tunes show. Coming up on Cartoon Network, next, a new Problem Solver.
I think what I like most about the soundtracks though are the different tones some of them provided. Some of the tracks you heard all had an upbeat dance-centric feel, but there are other ones that had more of a low-key feel to them, like the movie disclaimer one. And I actually find it funny how some people found this to be terrifying, considering in my cartoon outros video, I talked about how sounds and lighting can startle kids easily. So maybe this should have been an honorable mention. The lower tone of this soundtrack is very Cartoon Network On Demand-esque. You have other low-key ones, like the next bumper soundtrack. I don't know about you, but this particular song, with how echoey it sounds mixed with the dark colors of the next bumper, it gave me industrial vibes, like something being made in a factory. If you were watching an episode of How It's Made and they used this song, I don't think anybody would have noticed based on its vibes and how well it fits. But the most important aspect of the music would be what would come after most of the bumpers had finished, and that's the jingles. Nickelodeon, Disney Channel,
Hey, what's up? You're watching Disney Channel.
PBS Kids, and most of the popular kids channels all had iconic jingles or catchy tunes, except for Cartoon Network. I think the network knew that going in, which is why they addressed it with the Check It era. And if you hear closely, the jingle is 4 syllables, which actually coincides with saying Cartoon Network. Although Bluetooth would be credited for the music that helped Cartoon Network adapt to the modern era, Bluetooth has been partnered with Cartoon Network for a very long time. And Michael Kohler, Bluetooth's music composer, is to thank for that music. Michael has been credited for composing musical bangers like the Boomerang bumpers,
This is Boomerang from Cartoon Network.
Cartoon Fridays, and Har Har Thursdays. Him and Bluetooth's body of work is truly legendary. And if you'd like to see more of their work, the link will be in the description. I know the Check It era soundtrack for some is the most memorable or the most traumatizing aspect of the era. But either way, it was long overdue, in which Cartoon Network had to address eventually. Here is where the Check It era reaches possibly the most ambitious version of its branding and bumper style. The squares would shift, spin, and twist like a Rubik's Cube, which would then reveal the CN logo. These bumpers are very reminiscent of the Check It era's card bumpers from 1.0, but with more vibrant colors and characters. But the next and last set of bumpers that made Cartoon Network feel the most modern were the emoji bumpers. The emoji bumpers, as in the name, featured characters like Gumball and Uncle Grandpa in the form of an iPhone emoji. These would essentially be the network's sign-on bumpers to start the day after Adult Swim aired all throughout the night. Now, apparently there are some other bumpers that I've seen on YouTube and just wow. Like, if these are truly what Cartoon Network had aired, I mean, I don't even know how to describe these bumpers outside of ambitious. I must have been busy with high school to where I missed out on them. But for as ambitious 4.0 was in its art style, I know some people actually prefer the more focused 1.0 version. And I don't blame them, considering that one had the letter and dimensional bumpers. What people don't realize is that the Check It era would actually have one final version. But here's the kicker, 4.5 would be where the Check It era would end. The Check It era would be defunct on May 29th, 2016, and would be succeeded by version 4.5, which would actually be confirmed the Dimensional era. The Check It era was Cartoon Network's answer to the wide expectations that the 2010s had created. But I find it funny because when I asked some of you what you had thought about it, the answers were pretty positive more than they were negative. But some of you felt like the network was beyond saving because of its prior setbacks. But based on what we got with the big 3 premiere shows, the ambitious bumpers, and amazing soundtrack, it's hard for me to say that this era was a flop, which is why I'm giving it a thumbs up. But with the impressive run that the Check It era had, would the Dimensional era keep the momentum going and continue to adapt with the ever-changing landscape of the 2010s? We'll just have to see in the next era video. But if you're curious about the era that came before this one, you'll get to see how Cartoon Network saved themselves from a time where the network wasn't doing well at all.